Okay. All right, I think we're back live. There we go. Okay, so we are back live. Apologies for the brief technical interruption. If you missed part one of what this will be, it was mostly just a few minutes of us talking, sort of preliminary opening remarks and Mike talking a little bit about doing well in the percentages this year. So, in case you missed that beginning, we're moving on from there. So, I was just saying before we had our technical hiccup that it is nice when watching the ceremony to have, for most of the categories, at least one movie that you've seen. Because the thing that is frustrating or boring when you watch a category and they announce four movies or five movies that you haven't seen and don't know anything about, and then they give an award to one of them and you're like, yay, I guess. But if you've seen even one of them, that makes it more interesting because it puts context into the whole thing. So,
Yep.
but so before we jump into the winners, we could probably go ahead and talk about some of the uh, other points about the telecast this year, and to go ahead and get it out of the way. Um, Obviously, there was the whole Will Smith, Chris Rock thing that I don't know that we need to talk too much about. I'm seeing more video hiccups. Seems like it's okay. So, I mean, the sort of pinnacle of the whole discussion, as far as I'm concerned, is when Daniel Radcliffe was trending on Twitter because what he said when asked about a situation that he was not involved with was that he was tired of hearing people's opinions on the subject. And that got Daniel Radcliffe trending. An actor who was not involved, refused to express an opinion, and went trending for it. Like that, what a waste of everybody's time. All that is.
It's exactly how I felt after it happened, and why, as we sit here a week later,
Mm-hmm.
it there's no reason to dive into all of the things and takes that, I mean, they've all been done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
It
mean, yeah.
happened. It was distracting. It
It
looked
was, yeah, kind of an ugly, messy situation, and yet also not that big a deal, really. Like, why? Like, not that I'm excusing anyone, except to just say, who cares?
yes.
Anyway. So.
That's where I landed on it too. Like, he shouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a friggin' grown adult man.
Mm-hmm.
You can analyze all the reasons why it might have happened, and we're not going to get into that here.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
But even though he did, Chris Rock handled himself incredibly well.
He's fine.
He's fine.
He'll be fine.
The show moved on,
Yeah.
and that's about it. Like, it was
Like, this was
weird when
only
it happened.
even.
It felt staged when it
Yeah.
happened. Like, it was
Well,
something they were trying to do to, like, generate attention.
I'll
It
confess, I didn't even see it when I was not looking at the screen when it initially happened. I was distracted by something, and then I looked up when the sound cut out. And I'm like, wait, what's happening? And so I saw that bit, but I had to, like, it was obvious they were mad, but I didn't see the video until later. But even still, it's just something that, like, it's notable only in that it was on live TV, but otherwise, it's the sort of thing that if you heard about it happening at a club or something after hours, nobody would care. Like, maybe, the tabloid rags would run a story on it, but it would not become this national discussion. It's not a big deal. I'm
No, you
done
just
talking
say,
about
"What a
it.
fool!" Like, the dude's 53 years old. Why is he slapping somebody? Like, that's what you would laugh about,
Yeah.
and then you'd move on about your day.
Hmm.
And I did see it, and my wife and I were watching it, and we're like, we kind of laughed and like, well, I guess, is this what the Oscars like? Is this the kind of like, we almost thought it was performative
Yeah.
like get more viewers or something like that. It was
I
like,
think a
okay,
lot
this
of
is what we're
people thought that
doing.
at first.
Yeah.
And
And
I
then when the
mean,
sound cut out and it got weird, it was like that was a weird feeling of, oh, that might have really happened.
yeah, the in
Weird.
particular, yeah, I think there were a lot of people who were saying, "Oh, it's obviously staged." You can, and they were basically trying to talk about how Chris Rock like took the slap, and I'm saying it's like he knew it was going to happen because he saw Will Smith coming up on stage at him. Like he anticipated it because it was clear what was about to happen.
Yeah.
And I think there was a little bit of like, what is this? Is this going to be a punch or a slap or what? But he's not coming towards me to hug me right now.
No, he
Um,
definitely was, yeah, prepared for some sort of act of
yeah,
violence and was
hmm
just wincing in preparation.
yeah. So and yeah, so
And I
we're
will say this in because you said, I will tell you that you
okay.
did say like Chris Rock's gonna be fine. I
hmm
think those were some of my funniest takes, was the people who took it like so far to be like, oh, he could have like seriously hurt him. And then I think I saw something on Twitter where it's like, what if Will Smith's hand had been full of bees and Chris Rock was allergic to bees?
Yeah, I
He
know.
would have died, And it's just like it's such a silly like
Yeah.
taking it to that step that it made me laugh about it and
hmm
just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is
So,
ridiculous.
like, I think that Twitter's meme game was pretty on point pretty quickly for a while, and I only really got annoyed and tired of the conversation once people started taking it, like, actually seriously. And I'm like, all right, come on, everybody, settle down. Yeah.
A guy got mad that somebody made fun of his wife and smacked him.
Yeah. Should he have done it? No. But it's
No,
also
you
not
should.
as big a deal as people are making it out to be. It's
Right.
just like,
Not a big deal. Not a thing
no.
you should do. Those can
Yeah.
equally exist
Right.
in
Yeah.
the.
There's the difference between, say, I got tipsier than I should have, and I was hungover the next day, versus I drove drunk and crashed my car into somebody. Right? Like you shouldn't do either. But well, that's not maybe that's a bad example. But the point just being, we can say, was that a bad decision? Yes. Do, why do we even need to talk more about it? It's just like, yeah, he made a bad decision. If anyone was going to take it more seriously, it would need to be Chris Rock, but he doesn't want to. So it's everyone. Yeah. So we've honestly already talked about it more than I kind of meant for us to. But it's like
Yeah.
it's
I would just say
yeah.
again, I'll just leave it at this: the fact that Chris Rock was able to shake it off and
hmm
continue what he needed to do was admirable, because it was a break in the norms
hmm
that sort of shook everybody,
Yeah.
particularly him. And yet he knew what he was there. He knew the job he was there to deliver, and
hmm
I commend him for that.
Yeah.
And for also for not pressing charges or anything. Like after it was done,
Yeah.
like he
And like
didn't worry about it. Like he didn't make it any more of a big deal.
right. Well,
And
yeah.
he's
And
coming out looking the best out of this whole thing because it's not
yeah, I don't know.
humiliating for
I,
him.
I mean, I, I, I don't even think about it in that sense. Like, I'm not ranking the people involved,
Hmm.
like in that sense. But like I think, although it obviously didn't merit a slap, it was, the joke was in poor taste, and I think he knew it, and did it anyway, right? It's one thing, like, for example, there's that whole bit with Amy Schumer pretending not to recognize Kirsten Dunst and calling her a seat filler and that sort of thing, right? Like, but she was in on that. That was a planned bit. But making a joke like that to someone who's not, like, there for that and is not, and they wouldn't be okay with it, like, that's not great. I don't like that. But
No,
yeah, but it doesn't mean that he deserved a slap. It doesn't mean also though that he should be yeah, he did the right thing in carrying on with the show, but like it's like I thought the whole thing was kind of just, you know, it is just a high profile example of something that happens 1,000 times a night all across America, which is somebody says something shitty and someone slaps them in the face for it. Anyway,
But
so
that's not why we watch these movies.
no, no. It's weird though that it just kind of ends up dominating the conversation about the Oscars in general, which is feels, if anything, like that's a monkey's paw wish granted. If anything, for ABC, right? It's like we need something to happen in the ceremony that gets everybody talking about it, and yet but like there was actually a lot of stuff even separate from that though this year that I was feeling weird about the ceremony. Like there was the whole bit where Regina King was kind of playing that like a skit that needed to call up these handsome guys because they're randomly selected for extra COVID screening, which involves her patting them down.
Yeah.
Which like I don't think anybody was terribly like offended or hurt or felt necessarily exploited there, but I don't know that I think it's a particularly funny thing to joke about.
Yeah.
Like, is the joke just supposed to be that it's the gender swapped? Like we haven't heard high profile examples of how it can go that way. And like I don't know. I mean, I'm not horrifically offended, but I questioned their judgment in making that bit. You know, and then there was also bits where they made a lot of jokes about many of the movies this year, and like jokes about how nobody went to see them because they're long and boring. And then there's the three actresses who come up to award best animated feature and joke about how like cartoons, right? Parents gotta sit through them because the kids want to watch them over and over. I'm like, what are you doing? We're giving an award for the best one this year. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that weird like that the whole like self-deprecating humor thing that
Hmm.
has existed in and I don't want I'm not gonna blame Ricky Gervais, like it's not his fault, but
Hmm.
he was kind of like the embodiment of all of that. Like everything
Mm-hmm.
was all about like making deprecating jokes about Hollywood and
Yeah.
about all this. And that doesn't make people want like that almost isolates people more.
Well, like the other thing too is not that I thought it was great when he did it, but there was a little bit of a feeling like he's it almost wasn't self-deprecating because Ricky Gervais is kind of not Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Like he kind of is, but he has kind of a reputation. There's an air about him that he's not local, right? Like he is the guy who's coming and commenting on Hollywood from standing just outside it. Like that's kind of the perspective of a lot of his jokes. But when
Right.
it's coming
But
from the people who are right in the middle,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt.
that was my point.
I was just saying, but the same point of like making the theme of the show, making fun of the fact that of the things that are like hard to make the show accessible
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem to be the solution. And
Yeah.
whether you're coming at it from his angle, which you're 100% right, like he was trying to represent the everyman and deprecate Hollywood, but that doesn't exactly like make the everyman want to watch. Like, oh, I can't wait to watch and think about how I don't see all these highbrow movies. Like nobody wants to
Mm-hmm.
watch that. And
Yeah.
then the insider thing of like the self-deprecation, it's like, well, we're still doing so my hope is that we're in some sort of transition out of but it can just be a celebration like that's fine and
Yeah.
when it did the best is because when it's a celebration then what happens is leading into the celebration the people who like being around things that are being celebrated go and watch the movies so they can celebrate with them as opposed to well, I don't have to watch these movies because they're just going to make fun of the fact. Like, I know it's not like a cognizant decision that people are making,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. It just,
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you. I feel like this has been a problem that they've had for a while with this, like,
Right. Like
taking shots at their own.
I get that they don't want to come across as like pretentious and stuffy, right? But at least for me personally, I think of movies as a serious art form. And when you have the most prestigious award ceremony for the making of movies, I kind of do want them to take it seriously. And that's not to say you can't have comic relief in the show. Of course you can. But maybe that comic relief doesn't need to be about, gosh, huh? Well, what a bunch of weirdos we all are up here on stage just doing stuff. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not what this is. Or at least it's not what I want it to be. I want them to take it seriously. And like usually the people getting the awards do, and but I like yeah, I don't know. So a lot of the presenter stuff this time was not to my taste. And what I will say though is, even though I'm still critical of the way it was done, I was glad at least that the categories that they, decided to not have on the live telecast, that they at least did little segments for each one, even though they were so fast. They went so quickly that I feel like you could miss the first half of the sentence and not know what category they're giving out, because it would start and launch right into it, and then 20 seconds later they're done, and it's like, wait, what just happened? That felt really abbreviated, but I'm glad that they did that at least, instead of just not talking about them at all.
Right, and showing like a scroll of who won or something. I felt
Yeah.
like as weird as it was, just because we're not used to it,
Mm-hmm.
the way they handled it was exceeded my expectations for how they
Yeah.
were going to handle it, which I think is what you're saying too.
I think that if they're going to stick with that approach, which I honestly wish they would just go ahead, because this made more time for other stuff that was not awards that mostly I didn't care about and they could have left out. Like the other things they did instead of those things, they could have, but but like if they want to go with this approach, how about instead of like a 30-second segment, it's a 1 minute segment, right? I get that you don't want to spend 15 minutes on it, but maybe you could spend one instead of half. I think it felt so rushed, even for just a, you know in other news. But anyway, so yeah, like there was a lot of stuff about the ceremony. Like there was a few things I didn't mind. I kind of liked seeing the live song performances, even though, like some of them were strange. Like the idea of, oh, we don't talk about Bruno, even though it's not the actual nominated song, but we're also going to change it. And all right. um, I didn't mind the like the 60 years of James Bond thing necessarily, although it was weird having like extreme sports guys introduce it, like Tony Hawk and stuff. I mean, like what?
I thought all that was fine. I don't have any criticisms of it, so
Yeah.
I'm not. But I can recognize yours.
It's not even so much a criticism as much as just like, I don't get that. I don't see why that was the choice. But
Because they wanted to be able to tell people that Tony Hawk and those kind of people were part of the Oscars, and they're they had an aggressive move towards pulling the stuffiness
I
out of the
guess,
Oscar, and being able to say that Tony Hawk was a part of the Oscars is a huge deal for them, and they found an appropriate way to incorporate him. We can agree or disagree whether that is a good move. I do feel like it was if they decided they wanted to use Tony Hawk, it was an appropriate way to use him. So
I guess I just see no connection, and it felt, you know, like we're going to honor this franchise that's lasted for 60 years by having someone who has nothing to do with it introduce it.
yeah, but the people who are well, obviously
I
you're a fan of Bond and not, but Tony Hawk. But I I feel like there's a lot of crossover there.
Okay. I mean, I guess I don't want to disagree. I guess I'm not sure I follow.
Which I yeah.
Okay. In
I
any
mean, I'm not
case.
going to try to argue or convince you. I get it. Yeah.
Oh, well, but I get
I,
what is
but
the connection though?
I,
I mean, I get saying there doesn't need to be a connection, but you just said there was one and I don't understand it.
I don't think there's a connection. I think there's a
Okay.
crossover in the people who are
Oh,
fans of
okay.
Tony
Okay.
Hawk and people who are fans of Bond. I don't think
All
there's a
right. Okay.
connection between the two.
I get
Sorry.
that. That's all right. I
But
just like
yeah.
that's why I was hesitating there just because I was
Oh,
feeling
no,
like am I missing some piece of what was happening? No. Okay. It was just
no,
yeah.
no, no, no.
All right.
No, that I mistakenly explained myself. No,
Okay.
I feel like there's a crossover in demographic, and whether that's because they're the most popular Bond video game, the most popular Tony Hawk video game, are about the same time. I don't know. I'm not trying to put a real connection on it. I just know that a lot of people who are fans of both Tony Hawk and his longevity in
Hmm.
extreme sport are fans of the longevity and the reinvention of Bond as it goes along. And I know they wanted to put, I'm not saying if you were going to celebrate 60 years of Bond, Tony Hawk is the guy. But if you wanted to put Tony Hawk into the show, this is probably the place to put him versus all the other places he could have been. Is
Yeah.
that's my only, that's what I'm saying.
I get it. That's fine. Okay. Like I said, it's not like it was a huge objection as much as
Right.
a question mark for me. But
It was odd.
mhm.
I do give you that. Like
Yeah.
it was
I don't even
odd. It was
remember who the
different.
two other guys were. Because it was him and two other like sports guys, I guess, right? But like not even
Yeah,
like normal, not even like the big like the the football, baseball, basketball sports. It was like other like extreme sports guys, like I want to say like Sean White or something, but I don't think it was
yeah.
him.
It was Sean White. It
Oh,
was
was
Sean
it?
White.
Okay, okay, yeah. But
I
so just
don't remember the other one. Yeah.
all right. Well, in any case,
Any case, it
weird
was.
telecast, overshadowed by nonsense that I think if it weren't live, they would have just cut out of the show. Uh, but it was. I guess that's the sort of thing that happens when you do live sometimes. But let's talk about the awards because that's of course what we're actually doing here. So because of course this is not there's no question of like spoilers here. We might as well just go ahead and start right up front. So for Best Picture, the winner was Coda, which I think both of us were pleased with. I think going into the weekend, we were both feeling like that was our favorite.
Yeah, it was definitely my favorite, and I had since we last talked, I had seen King Richard, which was a very good movie. Um, I still think this was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I The only thing I really have to add is that I think I talked about this and I said I was going to talk to my cousin
Mm-hmm.
who is a interpreter
Okay.
about just the feelings she had about this and like the deaf community and all and not to take away from any other deaf community takes.
Mm-hmm.
She 100% agreed that it was a great thing that this movie was made and enjoyable and kind of shined a light on that. And I mean, she's a speaking person who has a job of interpreting deaf people. And she did not see that any of yes, there are things you could pick at,
Mm-hmm.
but overall, she loved the fact that such a fun, engaging, happy, emotional movie was made about this community. And so that, not that I didn't feel good about liking
Oh
it
yeah.
before that, but it
Well,
validated it a little bit, you know.
I think it's valuable to have the discussion and recognize that like it's these things are not black and white, right? These, it is totally fair for the people who did have objections to say like those, to listen to their objections and understand that and try to do as best you can, but you can't like no movie is ever going to please everybody. It's part of the problem when you have a lack of representation generally that it ends up putting so much weight on each individual movie that it's trying to be for everybody, but it can't be for everybody. And so you end up with like it's not a question of well some people like it, and so the people who didn't like it should shut up. No. But it also doesn't mean that just because some people didn't like it that we need to say the movie is bad, right? It's
Right.
it's mixed.
And I think a great point of what you said there was the lack of representation, because that
Mm-hmm.
was part of our conversation, is that there are plenty of sports movies that they put in things that, as somebody who spends a lot of time around sports, are just absurd. But I don't care because I just can enjoy the movie. But it's harder to not to dismiss those things
Mm-hmm.
when it's the only movie.
Right.
Right? Like when it's not just like, oh, here's just a bunch of sports movies, and so some are going to have different variations of accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is like, to your point, like the pressure was put on it, and the fact that it delivered in a way that it touched a lot of people, I
Mm-hmm.
think, and was just an all-around entertaining, emotional,
Yeah.
sweet, connected story in general. I'm happy with it. So,
I am too. I am too. So, you saw King Richard. Maybe do you want to have a more detailed conversation about that? I mean, we're going to probably discuss it a little bit more as we go on with the categories. Um, but I mean, my thought, like what I had said about it, was that I thought it was possible that it would win just because it felt like a very straightforward Best Picture kind of movie to me. Whereas Coda, I was thinking that it was possible people might still see it as a little bit too outside the mainstream, and therefore King Richard vote for King Richard instead for Best Picture. That, obviously I was mistaken in that regard, but certainly I think King Richard is very good. What did you think about it?
oh, it's very good, and and honestly, it won for the right thing. Like Will Smith, like was amazing in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The story that it told, and what I loved about it was that it gave this context that those of us who are around sports a lot and know, and you and I even, I think, talked about this. Like I even said something about like how, Venus was always, before I'd even seen it, Venus was always the one who was supposed to be the favorite, but Serena ended up being the
Mm-hmm.
greatest athlete ever. And you said, oh, that's actually addressed in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and it wasn't a very, in a way that made sense in the context of like what they were doing, of like
Mm-hmm.
that he had this like ridiculous plan.
Yeah.
And it did speak to that whole like dream big, plan big,
Mm-hmm.
don't just do what everybody else is doing. Like there was that whole undercurrent to it that really felt important, that of course only matters because they were actually that good.
Right. Like it's one thing to talk about like his plan, because I think it's very possible, to look back at the whole thing and say, okay, yeah, he made this whole plan, but the plan depended on a lot of things being done by other people that he really didn't have control over. And so it worked out. That doesn't necessarily mean it was all his plan, right? Like it's kind of like saying my plan is for the Patriots to win the Super Bowl, right? And then if they do I get credit because I said it was my plan? You know what I mean? Like, not that's not to dismiss that he obviously, had a very powerful personality and was very driven, and that I'm certain made a difference in how everything went. But it's also the question of, like I said, I think the movie depicts him as someone who had a vision and took a lot of wild swings and managed to connect on enough of them that it made the difference, and yet some of the misses could have sunk the whole thing.
Oh, agreed. I think I love that about the movie, is
Mm-hmm.
that it it doesn't, it's not like he willed all of this to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and the movie's not showing that. The movie's showing that he was bound and
Mm-hmm.
determined. Like it treats planning the way that, like, what's the quote, like, plans are useless but planning is essential.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah. Or well, certainly, like the saying that they say in the movie is, fail to plan and you plan to fail.
yeah, there's tons of those things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a Churchill quote of like, no plan survives contact with the enemy, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't make the plan,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah. Like,
there's so many variations of this
yeah.
exact thing.
What it reminds me of is actually Chris Hadfield, who is an astronaut, wrote a book called An Astronaut's Guide to Living on Earth. And one of the things that really resonated for me in that book was his take on the whole phrase "don't sweat the small stuff." And his point is sweat the small stuff while it's small, right? Like if don't let it become something big. And in that, so what he's talking about is in the context of space travel, there kind of is no small stuff. Like any tiny small thing could balloon crazily fast unless you do something about it. But the point just being, all of the different possible things that might happen, you can't necessarily control which one of them does, but you can think about what you will do if it does. And instead of worrying uselessly about something, you make a plan for it. And, doesn't always work, but, that's what you do. So, like, the whole idea of, like, so, like, I think one of the key examples is this idea of there's a lot of luck in terms of when opportunities come up and that sort of thing. But at the highest level, you also have to be prepared to take your shot when those random opportunities come up, right? Because otherwise, the spinning wheel comes up on you and says, "Oh, it's your turn to get an opportunity," and if you're not ready, you lost it, right? And so that sort of thing. But to be sure, like we'll talk about this probably maybe a little bit later in the best supporting actress, but like the mom character, right? Like there's the whole scene where she's kind of like, "Look, you make this all about you, but I'm still the one that's making sandwiches for everybody and getting people to places on time." And like that stuff is not like, that stuff is not like just you don't take that for granted. Like this, what I'm doing is also instrumental. I'm the one that's training with Serena while you are off with Venus, and like a lot of that stuff. So I thought it was really good. I liked it a lot, and a lot of it was stuff that I didn't know already. I knew that they became big stars, but I didn't really know any of the background.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so good is that it's entertaining and engaging from all of the perspectives that we just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
but it also is very real and gives, like I said, gives a context to how they got there that not everybody's aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Like how, because even if you didn't even know, like even people who only sort of know, like these are girls from Compton
Mm-hmm.
that have won Wimbledon. Like that's not a normal thing. Like it just isn't. Like let's not, like, we don't have to beat around it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it covers it plenty in the movie. Like that's not a dream they should have had.
Right.
And he gave that dream to them and equipped them to go get that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's it, it's a very, very good story, and movie.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and move along. So for the next category, best animated feature, the winner went to Encanto, which I think, between the two of us, we had largely felt among those selections, that was the one that we wanted. Although what I would recommend is that you still make time to see the Mitchells versus the Machines, because it is also very good, and I know a lot of I know a lot of people who are hoping that one was going to win, and I think it's good enough to be included in that conversation, even if I preferred Encanto a bit more. Um, Although what I will just go ahead and throw in now is that since like this year it wouldn't have been eligible for these awards, but this year Turning Red just came out, and I love it more than all of those. It's very good, and in some ways it was interesting to compare only in the context that it shares some themes with Encanto in terms of trying to please like an overly strict or controlling parental figure, but I feel like it lands the plane more effectively than Encanto. Like I said, my nitpick about Encanto is only that when the time comes to resolve that issue, it didn't do it 100% to my satisfaction, even though I can certainly understand the story they're telling, and I think that's fine. I just wish those scenes landed for me a little better, but I feel like Turning Red does in the way that I was missing in Canto. So recommend people check that out.
Perfect. I agree. Encanto was my favorite, probably my favorite movie of the year. So
I literally just I was walking my dog this afternoon, and I passed a house where some kids were playing in the backyard and listening to We Don't Talk About Bruno, and that made me pull up the soundtrack on my phone, and I listened to it on the rest of my walk. So yeah. Okay, so next, Best Director went to Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog. This is another. This is an example where it's interesting that the movie that won Best Picture was not even one of the ones nominated for Best Director. It does, there are some occasional like questions about like what does it mean to have the Best Picture and Best Director be separate categories, right? Like what does that mean? Do we think?
well, I mean, when the best picture is like when you take not just the best director, but you do take the producer's vision, you
Mm-hmm.
take the writer, you take the all the other things that like came together. And I get the director is responsible for a lot of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but there are pieces that they're not
Yeah.
in in the writing, in the you know casting sometimes, depending on the picture. So
Yeah.
I,
I agree, but there's the intent that Best Picture is like the overall gestalt of it, right? But that said, it does just still feel strange to say that Coda wins Best Picture, but it wasn't even nominated for Best Director. And I don't know, so I'm not complaining. I just think it's an interesting conversation to have. Like, what are they evaluating there? Because, for example,
but there's some nuances to the way the nominations happen. Is that there are 10 best pictures and 5
mhm,
best
it's
directors.
true. It's true.
So this isn't before it even wins.
Yeah.
Someone
It's
else has to make a decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true, and I think it's possible that there were some folks who maybe hadn't seen Coda yet until it was time to watch the movies for voting, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at this list of best directors. I mean,
Well,
this
it's true.
is
Although I was there's a Discord that I belong to that talks about movies a lot. It's associated with the Unspooled podcast, and there was a lot of discussion there because um, the hosts of that podcast felt that although it's technically very capable, that they were a little disappointed with Steven Spielberg on West Side Story because it felt like even though he does all of these technical things that are really done really well, they felt that he dropped the ball on making the actual central romance feel vital and powerful, and like it's theoretically the driving force of the whole show, except at least to their point, they felt like that part didn't work. And even if the rest of it looks pretty, isn't that supposed to be the part that's a big deal? Although it's perhaps a fair comparison, though, to say that the original doesn't work very well either, right?
yeah, and I think he probably gets some bonus points for bringing something from the past without modernizing it 100%, but yet doing just enough tweaking
Mm-hmm.
to modernize it. I think there's some credibility to him being nominated here.
Yeah.
And but I will say I do not mind Jane Campion winning for this one. I think
Mm-hmm.
this, when you talk about the best picture versus the best director, this is a great time
Mm-hmm.
to talk about that because Coda was definitely the best picture, but The Power of the Dog was a very, very well put together movie. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my favorite movie the way that I left it, and that's why I like Coda as the best picture.
Mm-hmm.
But as a did the director do their job and deliver us something powerful? This
Mm-hmm.
movie did that, and I'm also not comparing it to the director of Coda. To your point,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah, I agree. In a lot of respects, I think The Power of the Dog is in some ways a more ambitious movie than Coda, right? Coda is very good. This is not a criticism of Coda, but aside from the notable inclusion and representation of the deaf community, it's a fairly standard family drama kind of plot, right? It does it exceptionally well, but it's not really breaking new ground in terms of family dynamics or plot, right? Whereas Power of the Dog feels almost like this knife throwing act, right? Where there is a lot of decisions that feel dangerous being made every step along the way, and it feels like there's so many ways that it could go wrong, and then yet it doesn't. It pulls it off, and that does feel like a directorial achievement for sure.
yeah, and I think the pacing of it and all the stuff that we've talked about, the slow burn, like
Mm-hmm.
that's a directorial decision, right? That sort of lives independent. And you could say, okay, I love the directorial decision of Coda to lead with humor and lead with like getting us to know these people and then put the heavy stuff on later. But this one is it's just because of the story it's telling, the pacing probably matters a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So
Yeah.
so I'm good with it.
All right.
But
Yeah. Well, me too. Me too. Um, okay. So moving on. Best actor. We kind of mentioned this already, but Will Smith did win for King Richard. I think my personal preference, I kind of was rooting for Andrew Garfield in Tick Tick Boom just because I loved that movie so much and I wanted it to get more credit. And he is so good in that movie. He's so good in that movie. That I was kind of rooting for him. Not that I didn't like Will Smith. I mean, when we talked about King Richard briefly on a previous episode, I talked about just how like his star power matters in the movie, just because it makes you getting on board with the story right away easy because there's Will Smith. I want to watch Will Smith. Although, like, again, the fact that the whole altercation happened shortly before he wins Best Actor and then has to go up and give a speech just made the whole thing even more fraught. But yeah, I think that. Well, sorry, I don't want to just do all the talking. Do you have more
no,
thoughts?
I agree with what you said the last time. It hit that because so instrumental to this movie is buying into the fact that like Richard had this just presence about him that like drove all of this. Like we joked about like when we talked about the plan and their talent, all these things were key to it.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this other aspect of this just drive that comes out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. You get instant credibility when it's already somebody like Will Smith
Mm-hmm.
who's playing as opposed to just somebody else who you're like, oh, okay, I'm getting on board. This guy's got a lot of drive. No, it just like it clicks right away and allows you to get into the movie and the rest of the stuff faster.
Yeah.
So because of that, I agree. I mean, I think I haven't seen Tick Tick Boom, so I don't want to say that he was better than Andrew Garfield,
Mm-hmm.
but Garland, yeah,
Garfield.
Garfield, yeah. So I
You're
said that
thinking
right.
of Alex Garland, the director, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I honestly, I feel like there were so many appropriate wins in this Oscars, and this is one of them. Like
Mm.
he, yeah. So
I've heard some people try to downplay his performances, basically just Will Smith doing a voice, and I think that's really dismissive of a fine performance.
oh, because he
It's
does again, like again, those of us who have watched the Williams and have seen Richard, like he has the whole like body language about how he does it. Like
hmm
there's and it, but it's more than just the mimicry,
hmm
which usually bothers me when it's that's the best actor like standard is do you mimic them well?
hmm
He grabs that presence of like, no, I'm this is what I'm doing, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I piss my wife off, sometimes I piss my kids off,
yeah. Well, it's
and sometimes I'm yeah. Go ahead.
someone whose
Yeah,
passion burns so hot that he burns the people around him sometimes.
yeah, and he carries all that with him, more than just the
hmm
voice and the forward shoulders and sort of the like he has all of but he has all of it down, and it's very good. So
Yep,
anyway,
I agree. So, best actress. Alas, this is another year where we, between the two of us, we hardly saw any of the movies. I only managed to see one of the five. It is just more common that the Best Actress awards end up tending to be from smaller movies that not as many people go to see.
I've actually
Um,
seen one of these too. I just might not have got it on there.
oh, okay, which one did you?
Lost Daughter.
Oh, okay. So you managed to see Lost Daughter then?
I did.
Okay, yeah. What did you think about it?
Sorry, I'm going on there.
It's okay. I'll do it for you if you want.
Hey, I did miss that. Yeah, I got the other Lost Daughter
Okay.
awards. I just missed that one.
All right. Well,
Hey, the percentage just went up. One
yeah,
percent.
you did
Yeah.
it.
Ah,
Oh, and I think your percentage is. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Okay. But yeah. So what did you think about it?
I I hate to say it like this, but I don't mean this negatively. Like it
hmm
wasn't a waste of my time.
Yeah, I can see that.
I know
It's
that sounds like a weird.
it's a challenging movie in the sense that it asks us to follow a character who makes decisions that feel inscrutable at the time and kind of only sort of get explained at any point. Partly because they're not meant to be portrayed as having been rational decisions made with for good reasons in the first place, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're left with this sort of like you want to root for her, but you kind of don't because she does
Well,
weird stuff, and but
yeah,
you're
like
yeah.
there's one decision in particular, minor spoilers here, that this family
There's
that
a
she's
major decision spoiler that
well, I was
affects.
just going to say that there's this family where uh, their young daughter briefly gets lost, which sort of triggers some memories for our Olivia Coleman character, and in the process of finding the young girl and bringing her back, Olivia Coleman basically steals the girl's doll.
I feel like that's kind of a major spoiler, but
Well, I only just that happens. I mean, it's
it drives literally the rest of the movie, in my
okay,
opinion.
but
But
okay, but I mean, it's like the premise of the story, though. That's really kind of the first thing that happens. Everything up to
that's
that is
okay.
just
Yeah,
setting,
fair enough.
right?
Yeah, minor spoiler in the fact that
Yep.
like if you make it 15 minutes of the movie, that will have happened.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing that really
Agreed.
kind of
Okay.
makes the plot start moving. Is my point.
Yes. Okay.
Um,
Agreed.
so so for example, that decision is not something that like we're meant to say, oh, she's doing it because of X. Or for that matter, for her to even necessarily understand herself exactly why she's made that decision. But like a lot of that movie just does feel like you have messy, complicated people making messy, complicated decisions and dealing with messy, complicated consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty good, but it is certainly I don't know, one of those movies, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I said I was trying to figure out how to
Hmm.
put it, but I'm glad I watched it.
Hmm.
I did enjoy it. It's not something I'm just gonna be like throw on a Saturday afternoon for fun.
Hmm.
Um, because again, like you said, it's a lot of bad decisions and how those like how people interact and all that. That
Hmm.
it's very interesting, you know, and there are some incredible performances.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
obviously a little bit
Olivia
Coleman.
Coleman, yeah, is that she didn't win here. It was instead Jessica Chastain for Eyes of Tammy Faye. But yeah, Olivia Coleman is a great actress. She's been great in lots of things. I remember first sort of really noticing her as the queen in The Favorite a few years ago. I
Not in
don't.
Hot Fuzz.
I mean, I guess not thinking back, I guess I like her in that, but sort of wasn't like made aware of her as a person other than
Right. No,
you
I
know.
agree. I'm joking. She's very funny in Hot Fuzz. She's an interesting character, but yeah, right. The Queen is what really like when you start to see her trajectory.
Well,
Yeah.
what I was going to say is, but
Or
the
the favorite.
movie,
Sorry,
The
not the Queen.
Favorite, where she plays the queen, but
Yeah, yeah.
she's
Sorry.
also in The Queen, isn't she?
She is, which is
Yeah.
why I kind of
Well, that's why I was trying to clarify. So, in any
I meant
case,
the
though,
favorite.
yeah. So unfortunately, we didn't see the other movies in this category. But at the very least, we can vouch for Olivia Colman being good. So,
Yep.
all right. Let's move on to we've got Best Supporting Actor, and Troy Kotzer won for Coda, which was made me happy. That was definitely who I was rooting for because he's just so memorable in that movie. And it's certainly not even just about the idea of only the second deaf actor ever to win, or is it even nominated? Or wait, Marley Matlin had previously won. Yes, no, I don't remember now.
I think Marley Mountain's one.
Yeah, I think she
So
did, and so like it was because so he was the second winner, but like so it's not even just that as much as like he's wonderful in this movie, and he's just a very memorable character and conveys
well, he
so much
drives the
emotion.
spirit of the movie,
Yeah.
right? Like he without him, this movie
Hmm.
isn't what it is.
Right.
He's so because he hits all the notes. Like
Hmm.
he's what makes it funny and endearing at the beginning, and he's what makes it sweet and endearing and like soulful at the end.
Hmm.
And all of that is revolved around like how his relationship like evolves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He's so
yeah,
good.
I thought this was perfect. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Um, so, best supporting actress. Oddly enough, we had each only managed to see one of the movies where there was a best actress, but we both saw all five of the best supporting actress nominations because those come from movies that different movies. And this is just it's sort of a sign of the times. That's a consistent pattern with the nominations, that the best actress performances come from smaller movies that fewer people see. But you get a good supporting actress in other movies that are not so small. But in any case, Ariana DeBose won, who played Rita in West Side Story. Um, Wait, is it Rita? I'm suddenly blanking on the name because I'm thinking of Rita Moreno, right? So Anita is
Yeah,
the
it was
character.
Anita. Rita
Anita.
Moreno played Anita
That's
in the
that's the connection I was
there is
making.
Anita. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, I really liked her acceptance speech. She just you know it feels trite to just say she was so happy, but you know but I really liked her speech. And I think there was like all five of these I think were strong performances. We were just talking about Lost Daughter, where Jessie Buckley played the younger version of Olivia Colman's character in the flashbacks, which is a significant part of the movie. I mean, it's a supporting role rather than the lead, but it's a fair amount. It's not just a scene or two. And then
I
go ahead.
yeah, I mean I think that I can't pronounce it looking at the small screen.
Uh,
The King Richard.
yeah, I want to say ingenue, but it's like it's not spelled like the French word ingenue. but it
She
looks
was
like,
so good.
yeah,
Like this, I, I thought that she could have legitimately won this, and I would have been excited about that. You're right. Everybody was good. She was the only one I was kind of conflicted of because Ariana DeBose is great,
hmm,
but like you even mentioned some of the scenes in King Richard where you're
yeah,
just the movie doesn't work if you don't have the overbearing guy and then the grounded wife who's sort of like bringing it all back to earth in a
hmm,
way. Like it makes the movie work.
yeah, but
So
also like, yeah, yeah. So for anyone who didn't see the movie, she played the mother, the wife
yes,
of Will Smith's character, and in addition to being most of the time the one who is doing a lot of the stuff that just gets taken for granted, driving people around, working on, training for the younger sibling who doesn't get the same level of professional training at first, um, making sandwiches for everybody, doing all of that stuff, but also making it clear later, like to Richard, her husband, to say, "You think I'm doing this for you and your plan? No, I'm not. I'm doing it for them and for me. But if it was just for you, I would have stopped a long time ago."
yeah, that scene is
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
So
All right, so let's move along to best original screenplay, and I was a little surprised to see it Kenneth Branagh win for Belfast, just because that movie wasn't really getting a lot of other um, award love. Um, but I sure I think
and
it
I feel
was
like
not my
of
favorite.
all the awards, if you had to say, look, this can only win one award, what
Yeah,
do you pick? I feel like this is it. Like this
yeah,
was
I could see
I
that.
thought at least. I'm not
Well,
saying that it was the best written one, but of the movies to be generated like purely out of his head and all of the things that we liked about it, like the script is really the
well,
important
okay.
part
I
here.
mean, I'll give you that, but I'll also say it was not my favorite script among those five movies. I'm not even sure it would be three.
So Don't Look Up
King Richard, Licorice
was your number
Pizza, and The
one.
Worst People
No,
in the
I'm just
World.
saying Don't Look Up was probably your number
Oh
one.
yeah, I'm not sure.
I I don't know. For me, I disagree. I feel like it
Well,
was
okay, but like it's also that Licorice Pizza and The Worst Person in the World that you didn't
see
see
those. Yeah.
are the other ones that I would put above it. So
Well, there you go.
yeah, so there you go. But yeah, so I didn't hate this win. I thought it was a fine script, but it wasn't my favorite of those five. So that's all.
It was my favorite of the three that I saw. So
Well, there you go. Okay, so for best adapted screenplay, and it went to Coda, which was a good early sign for that movie. Although it very well could have been a circumstance like with Belfast, where that ends up being the only award that it gets, right? Like that could have been how it went, but it didn't. Um, I will say that I think all of those are good scripts for sure. I didn't say that with the previous category because I don't think Don't Look Up is a good script, but the for best adapted screenplay, I think these are all good scripts. And even with Dune, which as we discussed, I felt was capable but uninspiring, just feels like so like I used the phrase more than once, but that just feels so succinct in summing up how I felt about it. But just taking that book and making it into like um an an easy to consume movie where people can watch it and understand mostly what's happening and get it. It's a pretty substantial accomplishment. There's a lot of stuff you have to cut out and cut around to make that happen, and knowing where to make those cuts is important. It's a good script, but Coda won, and I'm glad it did.
yeah, I think Dune gets rewarded where it ought to have been rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay. Next there was for best foreign film, and it
I
went
haven't seen
to
any of these. So this is a great opportunity for you to talk about them while I go to the restroom,
Okay.
and
Well,
I'll join you there.
sure, sure. I was certainly fine with having Drive My Car win. Of the three that I saw Drive My Car, I saw Flea, and I saw The Worst Person in the World. I think that I maybe might have given a personal edge on The Worst Person in the World over Drive My Car, maybe. Um, but it was close. I think they're both pretty good. Flea is also good. I don't mean to diminish it, but I liked those other two more. And so I was happy to see, Drive My Car is one where I liked it well enough, but there's a handful of people of whom, like film writers that I really enjoy who just were absolutely blown away by that one. And it didn't resonate with me personally quite as much as it did for them, but I can really respect the impact it had on them and understand that, like, maybe even on a second viewing, I might even get more out of it. It's very good even on a first viewing, but that's kind of so I wasn't sad to see it win, even though I maybe kind of like Worst Person in the World more. Okay, welcome back. You ready to
Thank
talk
you.
about Best Original Score?
Yeah, I mean, here's where we get into where Dune shines.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a great score. The things that are great about Dune, outside of all what you talked about before, are just the the visuals and the pacing and the mood and like
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And the score drives all of that.
Yeah.
It it's supported by the great technical effects, which are coming later, but those technical effects are also supported by this great score,
Mm-hmm.
right? It just really did. I'm totally good with this. I like songs from Encanto. I thought The Power
All
of the
the
Dog had a good score,
Yeah.
but it
But like even the songs from Encanto though, that's not even really what like this awards for like the other
right. This
music.
has nothing to do with that. So
Yeah.
I think The Power of the Dog was probably second place in this, just because the
Hmm.
score, because that movie is so much about pacing, and the score helps with the pacing.
Yeah.
But I still believe that this, in my mind, this was the best score. Yeah.
I didn't really have a strong feeling about this category this year. I mean, I not not to imply that I was bored by them, but just like I wasn't passionate for any specific choice over the others. I thought they were good. Honestly, I didn't even hate the score for Don't Look Up. I mean, as discussed, I didn't like that movie, but that had nothing to do with the music. The music was fine. All right, so but moving to Best Original Song, I was kind of surprised for some reason. In my head, it felt like Encanto's song, even though they had not chosen "We Don't Talk About Bruno." In my head, somehow that was a lock. I'm not sure why I thought that necessarily. Maybe just by the same token that I thought Encanto was a lock to win Best Animated Feature. But I was a little surprised that it went to No Time to Die, even though when I was listening to the performance of it, I was like, "Oh, that's a pretty good Bond song." I mean, I don't think we talked about it when we talked about the movie, but I remember thinking sitting there in the theater that like this is a good Bond song. It feels in some ways. I think we talked when we talked about Bond movies in general that a lot of the Daniel Craig Bonds really did lean into wanting their Bond song to sound like a Bond song instead of being a little more experimental or something. But
Yeah.
that's pretty good. I don't hate that winning. What did you think?
No, I agree. I thought it was a little bit of a hat tip when like they performed "Don't Talk About Bruno" instead of the song that was nominated.
They also performed Dos
They, they
Orgulhos.
did, but the fact that they also added that
Hmm.
song was clear that they knew that the more popular song, since the nominations were submitted, which is probably
Mm-hmm.
what happened, is they didn't realize that "Don't Talk About Bruno" was going to be this
Yeah.
massive hit. I felt like they kind of knew that they
Mm-hmm.
weren't there, but
Yeah.
no, this was a great song. It was
Mm-hmm.
it fit with this movie. It was a Bond song. So yeah,
Yep.
I'm good.
Yep. All right. And so I feel like there's a bunch of these awards that we could almost read as a group. What?
Yeah. We're just gonna go
Yeah.
Dune,
Yeah,
Dune,
so
Dune.
best production design went to Dune, best cinematography went to Dune. Um, it did lose out on costume design, makeup, and hairstyling, but it did win best sound, best visual effects, and editing as well. So just kind of Dune, 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 and that's I think I don't hate those decisions either because to a large extent, like those were all the pieces, so when I say technically capable, like that's what we're talking about, right? Is
Yep.
is it's visually striking, like that. Honestly, that was the things. Those were the things that when when I was in the theater. Sorry, I'm laughing just because I suddenly thought of that kind of. There's a meme format that's going around where the idea is that, for example, to use it in this context would be to say, me in the theater when they're showing Dune, pointing and saying, "That's Dune," like when it's showing the desert, is like that's Dune. You follow me? Like, this I feel like the joke is bad in this context because that's not the best example of it. But like, shoot, I can't. I'm utterly failing to think of a better example of it. But the point just being, when a movie is named for something that's in the movie, and you point at the screen when that thing is, it says that's like you're referring to the title. Like that's the idea.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, I wish I hadn't brought it up now, but that is why I briefly started laughing in the middle of a sentence.
You
You want
got
to talk
that for
about?
me, but yeah.
Talk about doing some more.
I mean, Dune is super technically capable.
Mm-hmm.
It it's literally the best thing about this movie is that they and it shouldn't be discounted because it also is why they were able to cut it down to where it needed to be
Mm-hmm.
in as far as timing is because they could give some of the sweeping like stuff that at least in my imagination, I haven't read the book, is just where they're just like talking about the setting
Mm-hmm.
for pages and pages and pages, and it can be done with a super slow mo of a helicopter liftoff with a great score and like all the like you just I feel like I felt like I'm feeling what the book was trying to convey to me at that
Mm-hmm.
point. So it I think all of these things are important and were great in that movie. So
Yeah, no question about it. And so, even though I think there was a couple of other great movies in in those categories, Dune was great in all of those categories, and I think it's fair to reflect that.
yeah, if there was any award I was going to give to Nightmare Alley, like production design probably would have been it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it also had really great costumes,
Yep.
um, but but as we'll just go ahead and scroll to right now. Costumes went to Cruella, which I didn't manage to see, but my understanding is that it had impressive costumes in it, to the point where it was almost the point of the movie. It was to have people be in those costumes.
It is. My wife actually like modeled those costumes for Halloween last year. Like it's like a thing.
Hmm?
She did a little dance of joy that there was a movie that won that I hadn't seen that she had seen. You know, not that I don't make that a thing, but
Sure.
obviously like
Well,
I
yeah.
spent all this time watching these movies. She doesn't watch all of them with me.
Hmm.
And here's one that wins that I didn't see after all
Yeah.
of my efforts. And she saw just because she wanted to.
Hmm.
And also like, yeah, it's definitely a thing. Like the costumes in there.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and so I didn't see it, so it's hard to say. But I believe it. I mean, just from what I've seen, like so, I certainly didn't have any problem with that winning.
You understand that you know the premise of the movie, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah. No, I do. And I mean, like,
so. The costumes make sense, right?
right.
Because the
Yeah, no,
whole
that's
point.
what I was gonna. That's kind of what I was getting at when I was saying it almost felt like the point of the movie to exist was for people to wear those costumes. I'm obviously overstating it, but the point just being, the costumes are not just the things that they're wearing, but like the plot revolves around a lot of
Yes.
it because it's all fashion is part of what's happening in the story.
Yes. So okay, yeah. So you get it.
Yeah. So, and then best makeup and hairstyling went to The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which I, I think might be totally fine as a win, but I couldn't help but be amused because, of course, like one of the things that Tammy Faye Baker is like known for is her ridiculous eye makeup. And so I guess it felt a little bit like, okay, we're giving the award for them replicating her
Replicating.
ridiculous
Yeah,
eye makeup, I guess. I mean, the
it's the
title of the
replicating.
movie is like referring to it because it was so striking. Like, that's almost what people know about her more than the whole televangelist part. Maybe. I don't know. I think they
No,
might have done
I.
the televangelist part first, but still.
It's definitely television stuff. Um, but no, you're right. It's the replication that is what won this, which is why I felt like this was a better award. I mean, I didn't see enough of the best actress ones other than Lost Daughter
Hmm.
to criticize the performance, but this is what it should win for,
Hmm.
right? Like they're replicating something that's famous.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right. And so then the only other award category that we haven't kind of touched on with Dune's list there was Best Documentary Feature, which went to Summer of Soul. And unfortunately, neither of us saw that one. I managed to see Flea, but that was, this is another year where we didn't, every year I feel like we say we should try to make a point of seeing some of the documentaries, and then that's hard to do. It doesn't ever feel like priority. I think part of what's happening there is that when we're trying to choose movies based on the number of total nominations they get, other movies are weighted higher, whereas these documentaries are almost always going to be the only thing they're nominated for. I mean, Flea I saw, but in large part I saw it because it was also nominated for Best Animated Film and Best Foreign Film. So it was nominated for three things, and that made me more look at it. So I don't know. Maybe next year should we try to like weight those differently somehow, just to try to increase our chances of watching them, or what do you think?
I, yeah, we should talk about that because I 100% agree with you that
Mm-hmm.
documentary features come in with one nomination, which makes something that could be a phenomenal film
Mm-hmm.
equal to, for lack of a better example, Free Guy.
Yeah, and then I think exactly, and I think we both have a respect for and appreciation of documentaries, and yet we keep not seeing the ones there, and so I think maybe we should figure something out for next time.
I agree.
But so that kind of wraps up all of the awards. I think other than the non-award portions of the telecast being strange, I don't. I feel like this year didn't have any winners that really made me mad. Some of the ones I was really rooting for won. I'm pretty satisfied overall.
Yeah, I I agree. Straight up awards, this was dead on. This was one of the best ones.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm happy that I took the time to see all these movies so that I could actually feel that contentment and happiness.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I think that'll wrap it up then for our Oscar marathon this year. Maybe we can just briefly touch on the idea that I think we maybe mentioned this briefly, but we had talked in our last regular episode that the next episode would be these the like also rans where movies that won Best Picture in a year against something that's more famous today. And so we were going to watch Ordinary People and How Green Was My Valley. And I think, I don't recall if we actually said it in an episode here, but we certainly discussed offline that overall, neither movie felt us really made us feel really passionate to discuss them in detail. So I think
Correct.
we're not going to do that.
Cool.
But I don't know. So do you have any ideas about what we should do next instead?
Oh. Um,
Not to put you on the spot, although I guess I just did exactly that.
I had a weird thought the other day, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
Was to go back through the list, knowing that it's taken us 10 years to go through it,
Yeah.
and pick what's the one you want to rewatch.
Okay. Hmm.
And I don't know that that's the right choice. That was just something I was like, because I
Right.
saw something that we had already watched, and I was like, oh, we should talk about. Oh, we
You
already
know, my
did because it's on the list. And
yeah,
then I
my
was like,
hesitation there is only just that I think the ones that we're going to feel more likely to rewatch are kind of going to be the ones we already talked about a bunch, right? Because we liked them.
yeah. So maybe we make something like it can't be in the top 20. I don't know.
Hmm. Well, so we can think
I
about that. One of the other ideas that I had had, and we'll
mhm.
just toss this out too. We're just brainstorming here.
Yeah.
Um, is uh, again, I get a lot of ideas from the Unspooled podcast. I think it's a great podcast. People should check it out if they like this one. But one of the things that they were doing in the lead up to the Oscars this year is they called it the Contenders, although I'm not sure I understand the logic of the name. But the idea was they picked like the five best picture or best director nominated directors. They chose some other movie directed by that person to talk about. Which that's maybe something we could do is like what is we could pick some person who's respected or well reflected on the list, and what if we were to say, like for example with Alfred Hitchcock, like what was, if he has several movies that are on the list already, but do we think there should be a different one there, right? And I think we kind of did that a little bit already, right? Like I think we watched like Notorious for that reason, didn't we?
Yeah.
We've been doing this for so long, it's hard to remember some of the things we've done. But yeah, I don't know. Another thing that we could do, for example, is just to pick some specific year and then choose some movie that came out that year. Um, I don't know. Maybe we should. We don't actually have to necessarily decide this here on the stream. We could think about it some more, but
No, but I'm liking both of your ideas. I'm just not. I just don't know what movies to pick. Right.
sure,
Like,
sure. Well, I mean, I think if we were going to do like, if we were going to do, what I don't know. Which one of those ideas did you feel like you were more engaged with, the year or picking another movie by one of the directors who's got something on there? Like, for example, another thing we could do there is Robert Zemeckis is on there for Forrest Gump, which I think both of us feel is not his best movie. So what would we say should be there instead?
yeah.
Because I feel like there's several things could be chosen there, like Back to the Future, Who Framed
Mhm.
Roger Rabbit, right? Contact was his too, I think. Yeah, I think so.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, I mean, for the sake of just like not sitting here pondering,
Okay. Do you want to
let's
just
go with that.
we want
Go
to
with
just
that.
Robert Zemeckis?
Yep.
Okay. What should we pick? Do we want to? I just listed three. Are there other ones that you would want to?
I think Back to the Future is a must-have.
Okay. Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I certainly wouldn't mind rewatching those.
I'm just gonna just make sure that I'm not missing anything here.
I mean, he's made a lot of great movies for sure, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
he's also made a lot that were like, he made that one. All right.
Castaway. It's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Hmm.
um, yeah, just because the '80s thing is let's keep them in the '80s. Let's go
Okay.
with Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
All right. Let's do it. That sounds fun to me. Okay, so next time we will talk about Back to the Future. Uh, do we want to get into, like, I'm sure we'll talk about the sequels, but we're not explicitly rewatching the sequels, right? Like, grounds for conversation, but we're talking about the first movie.
Yep.
Um, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So with that, we will leave you for tonight, and I hope that in the meantime, before our next episode, everyone go out and watch good movies.